Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion. It is Monday, the 7th day of June, 2021. I hope your week is starting off on the positive side. Generally, I've got good news for you, and that is that the tropics are going to mostly behave for the week ahead. You know, we do have one area to talk about down in the Southwest Caribbean and the overall pattern that is trying to get to be more favorable. But, all things being equal, we're doing pretty good so far this season. This time last year, we were already up to our third named storm, and that is not the case this year, so there's that. All right, so let's get on with it. Take a look at what we've got. First of all, over at the message board, Storm 2K, I was perusing the 2021 indicators for sea surface temperatures, Saharan air layer, pressure, shear, steering, instability, and satellite images, the different indicators that us weather geeks over there like to watch. And I scrolled down, checking out what people were saying, and I noticed this from TC Alert, and I was like, okay, some new seasonal guidance from the Euro. So I clicked on that link right there, and it popped it up for me here in Twitter, and sure enough, here it is. And so this is what is being discussed, that the new ECMWF seasonal forecast came out recently. And there's a couple of things to note. The redevelopment of negative INSO, which is not La Nina necessarily, but cooler INSO temperatures, that's El Nino Southern Oscillation, both in the sea surface temperature department and with higher sea level pressures in that area. Warmth in the Gulf of Guinea, I'll show you where that is in just a moment, pushing the Atlantic intertropical convergence zone further south than usual. And then this one right here really stood out to me as I scribble through it. The accumulated cyclone energy, we'll just highlight it separately, ACE, that is 130% of the previous mean here going back to 1993. And basically the ACE that the Euro is calling for is about 165 units. Yikes, that's pretty high. So what does all this mean? Well, first of all, the mean sea level pressure, and this is again from the seasonal forecast coming out from the ECMWF, and it's got 51 members, it's got a big climate size. This is regarded as a pretty good, solid climate model, especially when we're looking out several months, and this goes out from September through October and November, so that covering the peak of the hurricane season. And we see higher pressures over here, this yellow, in the tropical Pacific with at least normal pressures. We don't see any of these higher pressures stretching through the Atlantic. So that right there is a signal of potentially a more active Atlantic season and a return to that pattern here across the equatorial Pacific with higher pressures there. That would make sense considering that there could be more of a resurgence of the cooler INSO. The precipitation anomalies I'm not going to worry about because the Euro has had a really bad time with this, trying to figure out, if you look at this, you go, well, where's the tracks? Because if you have higher anomalies or lower anomalies, depending on which way you're looking at it, you can start to try to, assume things, and the precipitation anomalies from the Euro just haven't been very good. So we're not going to worry about this particular parameter, so I'm going to throw that out. Now this is the ACE, the accumulated cyclone energy, and this is just its raw output, and it's showing an ACE score of 1.3. At least that's that's the forecast. The accumulated cyclone energy 1.3 is the standard deviation. So it's 130%. It's 30% higher than normal, and so if you calculate all that out and whatever, it's about an ACE of 165. That's the highest I think I've ever seen the Euro forecast an ACE for the season. That's incredible. To give you an example, I believe like 2019 and 2020, and some years even going back to 2017, it was forecasting an ACE in those years of like 70, 80, 90% of normal. It was below normal. And look what happened, from 17, 18, 19, 20. I'd have to go back and verify, but I do remember people on this same message board at Storm 2K talking about that the ACE just came out from the Euro for the season ahead, and it's calling for 80% of normal or 90% of normal. So it's below normal, below average. And this year it's calling for a score of 1.3, and the standard deviation there, being 30% higher than, so 130% above normal. It's like, dang, that's got to be, we really got to take that into account here. Either something's wrong and it's, broken. Somebody broke the Euro seasonal, or they have tweaked it and who knows? We'll know in November. But I'm just telling you, this is what it's showing, and that is pretty impressive for the Euro to be showing that. Sea surface temperature wise, a couple things to point out here, and let me zoom in if I can get this image. Let's open it in its own tab. There we go. The Gulf of Guinea down in this area, warmer than average, so you'd have the potential to sort of drag the intertropical convergence zone farther to the south. And what does that mean? Well, that means that that's the tropical wave conveyor belt. And if it's more to the south, these tropical waves can come off, and they don't have the influence of the cooler water temperatures. They're closer to these warmer waters, and they escape some of the effects from the tropical upper tropospheric trough that sits out here, the TUT, and just other things that can chop these things up. They can ride in lower latitudes before turning. That's another signal. When you see the warm Gulf of Guinea down here relative to average, that can tend to cause more problems for the Atlantic hurricane season in terms of more activity. And look, the Euro is showing the return of colder anomalies in the tropical Pacific. Not necessarily back towards La Nina in terms of by definition, but cooler. And we've seen other models. The CFS V2 is also predicting this. The NMME, the North American Multi-Model Ensemble, I think that's what that stands for. And now the Euro seasonal on top of that. There you go. The setup is for a pretty busy hurricane season for the Atlantic Basin. All right, so now let's look at the actual sea surface temperatures, moving away from the predictions. What's going on out there today? Well, it's interesting that the Euro is showing this area right here cooling back off, because as of late, it's been warming and just slightly on this side of warm neutral. So just a little bit warmer than the long-term average. So the Euro is predicting that this will cool back off, so you'll lose any heat content out here that's trying to burgeon. Is that a word? Trying to make itself more known, whatever. Any burgeoning, that's the word. It's going to kind of thwart that, if you will. At least that's what the Euro is showing. And then a warmer region over here, which you can already see. Look at this, the Gulf of Guinea right through here, already warmer than average. And so, there's several aspects of this that you can take and say, yep, that makes sense. And but this part here is interesting that it's warmer now. So I was thinking, maybe it's going to blow that part. And then I went and I looked at the subsurface charts, and look what's happening. And let me see if I can force this to refresh itself, hopefully. Haha, I can. I love it. These GIF animations, you never know. So this is an animation of the subsurface going back through April, and you can see all this warmth that was starting to gather. This is the surface of the Pacific. This is down at about 150 meters or so, and it looked like, oh, here we go. We're going to get an El Nino or whatever, and then all of a sudden, look what happens. It starts to fracture. So there it comes, charging in these Kelvin waves, these downwelling pushes of the warmer Pacific waters, and then they move across and they upwell on the eastern side of the Pacific, spread out and create warmth. But look what has happened. Just watch. You'll see it's subtle, but it's there. It expands, and then it starts to shrink away right through here, as it looks like we might be developing an upwelling version, another Kelvin wave there of upwelling nature. And then you've got over here on the eastern side, it got chiseled away, and then it starts to resurge a little bit there. So maybe the Euro is on to something, and you would hope so. You want to be able to rely on these predictions, even if they are predicting something that we might not necessarily enjoy. And remember, hurricanes are only a nuisance because we get in their way. And, I put that very humbly out there, but it's true. And I've said it before, that if we didn't have hurricanes, we'd probably have something worse. To quote one of the greats of all time, Dr. Neil Frank. He originally said that back in the 80s, I think. And it's true. So you look at this kind of stuff and you think, well, okay, interesting. The Euro is predicting all that. Not necessarily good news for me, but if we know that it's coming in advance, I think that does help us to at least mentally prepare, and in some cases physically prepare, and prepare economically, or the fiscal sense, F-I-S-C-A-L. So we'll see. Very interesting stuff there. All right, actual sea surface temperatures instead of anomalies and all that kind of stuff. I like watching this to see how the temps progress in the Gulf of Mexico, pretty much everywhere except the extreme northern part up here near the Florida Panhandle, at or above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Just a couple of spots up here that might be 79. I don't know. I mean, the sun angle, if it's nice and strong down there, maybe it washes that out, so to speak. But basically, the Gulf of Mexico is warm enough for tropical cyclone activity. This is 28 Celsius or about 82 Fahrenheit right here. And anything inside of this isotherm means line of equal temperature, that's 29 Celsius. And so, yeah, the Gulf is still warming. It will warm up all the way through August, and it'll get nice and toasty, and it's always warm enough for intense hurricanes, always. Believe me. It's just a matter of where are the anomalies, and if we go back to the anomalies chart, it's running right about where it should be overall. If you look at the Gulf in here, nothing jumps out as cooler or much warmer than average. In the end, it just kind of generally is a wash, if you will. Again, nothing jumping out as abnormally cold or warm. In the Atlantic, water temperatures gradually warming up here, at least south of Hatteras. Still not warm enough for me. I like it above 80, but we're getting there. 23, 24 Celsius here along the Carolina coast, at least North Carolina. South Carolina, you're getting there. And if you go down to Hilton Head and points south, Savannah, Tybee Island, that area, the beaches east of Jacksonville, water temperature is 80 degrees or so. So this will continue to warm up, kind of chilly still off the coast of New England and the mid-Atlantic states. So maybe by July 4th, if we can get a big old heat ridge to build up over this area and kind of calm things down and give us some easterly flow, we can push some of this warmer Gulf Stream water towards shore and make it more tolerable for those of you that like the warm water. All right. National Hurricane Center, nothing in the Atlantic for the next 48 hours. We do have this one area highlighted down in the Southwest Caribbean at 20%. I believe this will get dropped in the next couple of days, and eventually it might kind of morph and evolve to somewhere up in here. We'll see. It is a very complex, let me restart that section here. We are entering a very complex pattern that may or may not end up with development. It's going to take a week to 10 days for this to play out. And instead of trying to speculate every single day on every single deterministic model run, we'll just look at the bigger picture and say, yep, there is a more favorable pattern coming up. What do we look for? What are those keys to the game that I like to talk about? And then we'll just kind of sit back and watch, and trying to, again, figure it out with one deterministic model run. Whether or not it's from the Canadian, the GFS, or the Euro, it just doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You got to look at the ensembles, and even those are not really telling right now. We don't have a majority consensus yet that anything of note is going to come up out of here. So I'm just going to put a big X down here, as in, don't worry about it right now. I mean, we're still going to talk about it, sure, but there's nothing to get upset about. That is for sure. All right? Looking at the satellite picture, this helps to tell the story too. Great satellite shot here, this natural color coming in from tropicaltidbits.com. A couple of items of note. You can see the strong southwesterly winds cutting across the Caribbean. So you folks in the northeast Caribbean, Puerto Rico down through the Virgin Islands, over to St. Bart's in vicinity, or St. Bart, sorry, not Bart's, St. Bartolome, over to Barbuda, Guadeloupe in there, Antigua. Yep, some high clouds streaming through in the upper levels, those high clouds going this way. And at the lower levels, you have the trades coming in, maybe an embedded tropical wave coming through here, but it's kind of dry overall, and it's not going to amount to much. So just some small localized showers and towering cumulus clouds out there. That's about it. This is kind of neat to see. You can see the Saharan air layer, speaking of SAL, like I showed you earlier, from Storm 2K. The indicators that we look at, well, there's one of them. Lots and lots of particulate matter getting ejected out into the Atlantic by lower altitude jet that comes through, a little jet stream kind of action. The African easterly jet, the AEJ that pushes through there. Huge source of wind and heat and dryness. And it just pushes this giant plume of continental dust, silicate, particulate matter into the Atlantic. And sometimes you even get, and I am not making this up, locusts and other things that get deposited on the Cape Verde Islands or the Cabo Verde Islands, depending on which pronunciation you prefer. And the fishermen out here have to deal with that as well. Read about it. That's not just internet BS. It's true. And that's in the stronger outbreaks that really kicks up a bunch of stuff and it gets suspended in the atmosphere, the lower 5,000 feet or so. And sometimes, yes, it's including insects. The other thing to note is there is some energy, convection, if you will, trying to gather around Central America. But notice it's all stretched out, nothing really bundling up, nothing grabs your eye on this particular satellite animation as being organized. And we can see that represented as well if we kind of peer through those clouds and look at the vorticity signature. Is anything trying to bundle up? And the answer is generally no. You know, down there across the tropics, nothing's bundling up, except in the eastern Pacific. We do have this one area. This is Invest Area 92E. There's another area trying to come together here just to the west of Costa Rica and Panama. But by and large, the tropical Atlantic, no. There's nothing out here at all. And again, that's perfectly normal for the month of June. We wouldn't expect to see anything, but this will help as serving as a big clue. Do we see anything in this area over the next week or so that tries to bundle up and look circular like that, or even like this? And until and unless we do, nothing is going to get to develop. It'll be, if the energy is stretched out and it doesn't bundle all that heat, you don't get a tropical cyclone. It's that pure and simple. All right, so speaking of the Eastern Pacific, there's 92E. It looks like it missed its opportunity. Now down to 50%. It was up to 90% over the weekend. And this is interesting because, the Pacific usually cranks these things out. And the Atlantic's the one where you get these, oh, look, it's 90%. It's going to go. And then it doesn't happen. That seems to be an Atlantic problem. You don't see that in the Pacific very often. And I believe that this is showing us something important. And I know that not all of the Pacific systems develop every time, but this is interesting. Blanca didn't become a hurricane. And Andres, which formed just a few days before the official start of the Pacific season, so we won't count Andres, the first one. But this next one here, this 92E, it looks like it's not even going to become a tropical depression at this point. And I think this is telling us that the Eastern Pacific is not going to be particularly active this year. Yes, we're going to get a couple of strong hurricanes out there, but it's not off to the races, gangbusters, fast and furious, right? Why? Well, look, the water temperatures out here, except right up against the coast near Acapulco and Manzanillo and Zihuatanejo and all that, out in the open tropical Pacific here, where these systems are trying to get going, it's just right where it should be or slightly cooler. We're not seeing a strong upward motion and energetic signal in the tropical Pacific. So this is not a big surprise to me. It's interesting, but it's not shocking. So you look at this and you go, oh, look, Mark, it's got a nice blob there, and you showed me on the vorticity signature that it was nice and round and bundled, so what's the problem? Well, let's switch over to visible. I love these tools. There you go. It's an exposed circulation, strong winds coming in from the east, knocking the convection back towards the west, and when the two cannot align, the low-level center here with all this deep convection here, when they are separated, it just doesn't work. You don't get the engine lined up. By the way, that is the remnants of Blanca. Yep, still sitting out there, just a little bit of swirly clouds, whatever, over the cold waters. And those waters out there are definitely chilly, probably in the low 70s at best. I would imagine maybe mid-70s, but still too chilly for tropical cyclones. And then farther to the east, there is some energy trying to bundle up over here, but it'll take a little time and it might develop. And if it does, it'll move away from the Mexican coastline. Moving on, let's see, models. Yeah, I want to show you this. One of our patrons over on the Patreon site sent me a message, Ernesto, saying, oh, Mark, I know how you like the 850 millibar charts in showing that bundling of the atmosphere and the energy. And, I like to show the one from Tropical Tidbits all the time, and he referred me over to Pivotal Weather. And it's just different ways that maps are displayed. It doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other, but this one really kind of smoothed things out, if I can say it, if I can speak smoothly. And let me just show you what I'm talking about. This is the GFS, and this is that height of the atmosphere that Ernesto was bringing to my attention. That's my favorite layer, 850 millibars, at least for playing detective. When we're looking for areas of where the energy is trying to bundle, this is it. This is where it's at, as they say. So watch. This is the Caribbean. Let me just outline a couple things for you here. I know it skipped ahead. It's one of the things I don't like about this particular site is if you accidentally touch the thingamajigger up there, the slider, it jumps, but it's okay. We'll get back to it. Let me just show you what's what, first of all. There's the Florida Peninsula. There's Cuba right there. And here is Central America, the Yucatan Peninsula, and so forth. And all this through here is your energy, the vorticity, stretched out over time. So let's move this back, if it'll let me, to the beginning. And let me show what I'm talking about. So let's just move this forward. This goes about every 12 hours. And just look how amazing that is, how fluid the atmosphere really is. And you can see that turning down there near South America. Watch right down here. You can see that pretty clearly as I move this rocket back and forth. So there is some vorticity down there trying to close off. But furthermore, as we go out into time, notice that this whole gyre process that I talk about often, the Central American gyre, that starts to try to take shape down here. This big counterclockwise turning of the atmosphere starts to set up. And again, let's just move the slider back and forth here through time. See, it sets up right there especially. Starts to get established over Central America, and we're way out in time. We're talking more than a week now. So that tells us a couple things. First, it's going to take a while for anything to get going. And second, look, it's tangled up over Central America. If it was a little bit more to the east and a lot of the energy was trying to circulate over here, that would be a different story. So pretty cool tool there from Pivotal Weather. I like that. How you can really see things wrap up and the atmosphere sort of do its thing. But this is going to take a while. Like I said before, a week, 10 days maybe, that's a long time. We're getting out almost to the end. We're going to be in the last third. 10 days from now, well, not quite the last third. All right, so around the 17th. Jumping ahead a little bit, but that's the point. It's going to take a while. So don't obsess over it. Don't worry about it when you see one of these little yellow blobs pop up. Read it. Read what it says. Don't look at it and think, that's it. It's all over. No, it's not. It's a 20% chance of development, and I just showed you why. All right? Okay, every morning, if you like, start your day with a podcast from yours truly. It's called Hurricane Season, the podcast. It's available pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. And check it out. It's a little short as compared to this update. It is a short digest as to what I'm looking at each morning. What are we going to talk about in the day ahead on the video discussion? And this will be every day. So check it out. Share it with your friends, family, colleagues. Let them know that this little audio podcast is out there. And then each afternoon I will produce this, the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion, where, like we did today, we will go into great detail. And, of course, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. It's all there. At least that's as much social media as I can handle. And like Ernesto, you can join Patreon. What is Patreon? It's an app and a website where people like you can, if you feel like it, if you're in the mood, if you're in the financial position, whatever, you can crowdfund and help our future. We have over 600 different people around the world between Patreon and our old Hurricane Track Insider legacy subscription service that we've had, and it has grown into so much more than just a typical subscription service. I mean, look, I get an email from Ernesto. He's one of our active patrons. There you go. It's all about the connections. I love it, and then it helps to fund what we do in the future, and that's where we are. All right, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack if you want to get involved there. All right, that is it from me for this Monday. Have a great rest of your afternoon. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.